It's official, the Norton Manx R reviews are in. This is one of the most anticipated bikes of the year because it's Norton's first stab at a modern super bike since their reincarnation with TVS. Now, I got to see this motorcycle in person a couple of times. The first time was actually at EICMA in Italy in November of 2025. And when I first got to see it, I wasn't really in love with the way that the bike looked. Then I got to see it again in person at the bike shed in California, and I started to vibe with it a little bit more, but something felt a little off. And I think that's probably why my invitation to the event that happened over in Spain probably got lost in the mail, because the people over at Norton were like, what's this guy know? Screw him. But I've really been trying to keep an open mind about this motorcycle because it's one of the first to try and really challenge the Panigale V4 and the Aprilia RS V4 and the BMW S1000RR for this like super bike mantle. And it was one of the first ones to come out that doesn't have all of the crazy aerodynamics on it with the wings and super aggressive lines. It's a little bit refreshing almost nowadays. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna try and figure out what this thing's all about. I went through and watched a ton of different videos and I've found some takes that are a lot different than I was expecting. We're also gonna take a second and we're gonna talk to Dave from Canyon Chasers, who actually went out to the event and got to ride the bike both on the racetrack and on the street. But let's talk about some top line specs on this thing. We're dealing with a 1200cc V4 putting down 206 horsepower, 96 foot-pounds of torque while weighing in at 463 pounds in the base Manx R version, which is kind of funny that the Manx R is the base model. But there are 4 different versions of this motorcycle, and we don't actually have any American pricing, any North American pricing. The only numbers that I've been able to confirm are from the UK, and this thing's a spicy meatball. We are looking at 20,250 quid for the Manx R, which is the base version. Then for the Apex, we're looking at 24,750 Doctor Who bucks. The signature version of this motorcycle is 38,750 bangers and mash. And then we have the first edition, the Founders Edition of this thing, which is basically gonna cost you all the chimney sweeps in loony old London. You essentially have to apply to get this motorcycle and show up with your bucket of money and hope they give you one. Now let's talk about some of my expectations for the bike, because I'd reckon yours are probably similar if you were looking at any of the pre-release coverage of this thing. I was assuming that we would be dealing with an out-and-out race bike competitor, something that's gonna go toe-to-toe with the homologated RS V4 or the Ducati Parmigiano or the BMW S1K RR, because BMW people are too busy posing shirtless on TikTok to say 1000. If I was gonna boil it down to 3 things I was expecting, first and foremost, we would be dealing with some incredibly uncomfortable ergonomics. We're dealing with inaccessible power on the street and track performance that's really only accessible by the top tier of riders and racers out there. The crazy thing is, from all of the content that I've been seeing about the Manx R, that's really not what Norton tried to do. So to help set the record straight, I actually brought my good buddy Dave from Canyon Chasers out to talk about this thing and help us set the record straight about what the Manx R actually is. 2 things real quick. I can't believe I forgot to mention it. Dave has a full review on his channel, and all of the footage that I'm using from the Norton I got from Dave. So go check out his video. I'll have it linked down below. Secondly, we talked for like 25 or 30 minutes about this motorcycle. So if you want to see the full interview, I've got it over on the Patreon or for YouTube members. That is also probably linked down below. Let's get into the interview. So Dave, real quick, I wanted to kind of get an idea of where you see this thing landing in the superbike class.
I mean, honestly, I think it's the superbike for the mere mortal or the average rider. You know, like you and I have both spent time on Panigales and S1000Rs, and like you have to be really talented or really giving it the beans to extract any of that from them, right? This one, Redline's more like a Tuono. It's like a lower redline, and the power delivery was softer, and aesthetically, I think it's prettier because it's not doesn't have wings on it. It's not gunning for a World Superbike championship, right? It's a dude who wants to go get coffee and maybe do an occasional track day and ride with his buddies on Sunday, I think.
So it's funny that you mentioned the Tuono, and we're actually jumping ahead in my questions, but how does it feel in comparison to something like the Tuono, which is this super aggressive, fast revving bike? Is this a little bit more slow, or is it still pretty goddamn hair on fire?
I would not describe it as, I mean, it's fast. The bike is fast, but I wouldn't describe it as hair on fire. Like if you ride an RSV4 versus a Tuono back to back, most of us come away thinking, man, that Tuono is scary, right? It's more like the Super Duke, right? It's just like, oh my gosh, everything all at once. This never felt like that. It was a softer delivery. So it made it easier to ride fast, if that makes sense.
So would you consider this like the street super sport then? Kind of like the first thing that went in my head was the gentleman's sport bike. We hear that a lot with like the Speed Triple, or going back a few years, the VFR 800. Is this something that's a little bit more street oriented, or is it still super uncomfortable to sit on and very much that proper super sport, or is it kind of a mix between the super sport and more of like a 650 class?
All right, so that's a great question because I didn't really think of it in those terms when I was out there. It is certainly way more than a VFR. With all respect to the Triumph, it's way more fun than the Triumph. I'm old, so the bike that I think it's probably most comparable to is the original 90s, late 80s Ducati Super Sports, right? It was a committed seating position, but for the time it was a little down on power from super bikes, but people toured on them. It was way more fun for canyon rides than the 916 of the era, or the 851s and the 888s, which were really, really aggressive. So like they sold those super sports hand over fist. They were everywhere. And yeah, I think that would be the closest analog I could probably draw.
So along that line, does the power actually feel accessible? We've probably all at this point seen that bar graph that has, kind of a percentage of riders and where they tend to be that Norton showed you guys. Does it actually feel like it's delivering all that power in that middle of the power band?
It does, but you know how like on the big bikes, you short shift them a lot. You're always a little nervous. Like you have to know what's in front of you before you twist the stick. This one, even when you gave it like a full, like you really twisted the go fast knob, it never felt overwhelming. It wasn't like that big power hit, like what the Tuono or what the Super Duke does. And by the nature of it being a V4 as opposed to a V twin, it doesn't have that like, it's a lot of torque, but it doesn't have that punch like a twin does, right? I have, obviously, I'm a V4 guy. I have a couple of them. It kind of is a little bit in between the Aprilia and the Multistrada V4, not the Panigale V4. It's more exciting than the Multi V4, but not quite the Aprilia V4.
Interesting. So this is another one of the questions that I had for later on down the line, but you brought it up. You're a V4 guy. I'm a V twin guy. Everything that I've seen in the reviews that, they're going off of the presentation that I'm sure Norton had you guys sit through, they put a lot of effort into sort of spacing out those power pulses so that you could get more grip to the ground and not have to rely so much on the traction control. That's kind of the thought process behind one of these giant V-twins, is the power pulses are spread pretty far apart. You get a lot more mechanical grip out of something like this. Do you think that the Manx R actually benefits from being a V4 over a big V-twin?
Well, of course I'm going to say yes because I like V4s. But the syncopated, the crazy firing order, I think was a big part of the charm. It sounded really unique. It had a really fun sound. It's a shame they didn't fire up the one with the Akrapovic on it because it was muted, right? Like all the Euro 5 stuff. I'd love to hear the thing a little bit more open because it had a really crazy cool rhythm to it that made it fun to listen to.
So let's talk about the tech a little bit, because this thing's got that giant ass like touchscreen TFT, which we're starting to see those proliferate a little bit. How does it feel to sort of interact with the menus and stuff on this bike?
So I'm pretty ambivalent on TFTs and menus and stuff like that. I kind of don't care. I was a little disappointed that the design and style of the motorcycle is very unique, right? It has this really unique design language. And none of that came over to the gauge. The gauge just looks like a gauge. I guess the pro of this thing being somewhat plain was it was really easy to read. You can put it in full-time dark mode, which I think should be a mandatory requirement. Makes me crazy.
Yes.
I hate freaking light mode. But when you put it into the track mode, the entire layout changed completely, where the most prominent number on the screen, which I was so grateful about, was the gear indicator.
That's awesome. That's actually awesome.
Right. The track I was on, I had never been on before, and it had a bunch of really tight turns. But the bike had so much power that if I downshifted into first, it kind of put me into a situation, like it was like, whoa, too much, right? So it was great coming down that big, long freaking straightaway and be like, well, just stop at second. You get this big, giant number 2, because like I could pull fine through that really tight turn in second with all that torque.
In a world where a leader bike nowadays has to be this bleeding edge homologated thing that's only for the 1%, this kind of feels like they're trying to make the bike just a little bit more accessible to the normal rider, which makes it hysterical when we start thinking about some of the prices that we mentioned earlier. But the idea that the first edition is like, well, show up with your bucket of cash, we'll see how deep it is, and maybe you can get one.
Well, I think it was even that. It's like you have to call and beg us to sell you a first edition. You have to, how many followers do you have? It was, I don't think many of us are even going to see the first edition. But yeah. And I'm not going to say the word accessible as far as like how it was to ride. I'm going to say it was more fun. It's hard to ride. I always talk about like the Panigale V4, like the super mega one.
Yeah.
Riding that bike is, for me, it's an exercise in panic management, right? It gathers speed so fast that the acceleration's over before you even got to enjoy it. And you're spending almost all your time on these brakes that are so mega that you're like, riding a Panigale V4, unless you're tootling around on it and just listening to the motor, I don't find to be especially fun. I didn't really love the riding experience, even though like the thing means every single race you put it in, right?
Yeah. That's actually exactly the way that I would describe the M1000RR that I got on. I was on it for 20 minutes at COTA, and it was the most harrowing experience I've ever had on two wheels, because it made the kilometer-long back straight happen so fast that I was just like, holy shit, I'm coming into a 95-degree corner at almost 180 miles an hour. I'm glad I have a lot of runoff here.
Right. It's we always joke that these super bikes, they don't accelerate down the straightaway. They just teleport from corner to corner, right? It's like Star Trek. You come out of the last turn down the straightaway, and all of a sudden it's just really little on the end of the straightaway, like Star Trek, right? Where's the fun in that, man? Like, I like acceleration. I like that feel. Like the street ride they took us on, it was more fun for me on the street than the track, and that's not normally the case for me. But these roads were kind of, like, I don't know, maybe 60, 70 mile an hour corners, big sweepers with like tight little ones mixed in, and the asphalt was great. I thought it was just a place I really wanted to be. It was fun riding. You just roll through the throttle, and it trail braked really nice. Those high pure calipers are magnificent. The potentiometer in the suspension, so it knows exactly what the thing's going. I haven't ridden the EC3 Öhlins yet, but man, the Marzecchi whatevers are way better than the old semi-adaptive Öhlins stuff.
So in this kind of vein, does it feel more at home on the street or the racetrack? Is there like one spot you can feel like this is definitely where the bike wants to be?
I think fast, flowy roads, like fast, flowy local roads, is where It really felt at home. It was fine on a track, right? So I think it would be for someone who does like the occasional track day, 2 or 3 track days. This is not, nobody should buy this motorcycle to take on their local regional race series. I don't think it's the bike for that. But for how most of us ride and the experience that most of us want, I thought it really scratched that itch really nicely.
And then I've got one last question. This one's purely hypothetical. But everybody's talking about how they're trying to make all of the fasteners disappear and make it so that the bike is super, I'm not going to say covered up, but none of the lines are disturbed, right? How much of a pain in the ass do you think it's going to be to pull that side fairing off that motorcycle?
That was the first question I asked them. And they told me... So, like, if anybody remembers the old Ducati ST2 and ST4s when they came out, I was working at Ducati at the time, and that bodywork was the same thing. You're not going to see any fastener. And it was so horrible that the factory team took hole saws to the bodywork so they could maintain the bike without having to take the panels off. So that was my very first question. They told me, they didn't show me, they told me there's one hidden fastener that they wouldn't even show me where it was, that you undo that and it removes one panel, and then it basically, you can have it stripped down within like 5 minutes. And they said it was really easy. To start rounding out some thoughts on this, Manx R, thumbs up or thumbs down, or are you going to wait for the just like naked bike Manx? I give it a huge thumbs up. I love that it exists. I love that TVS came in with like, what was it, $20 million or $200 million, whatever their investment is. I think this is the most, a lot more, yeah. It's the most stable Norton has been probably since World War II. And it's such a cool brand with such an amazingly cool history. It was really fun talking to the chief technical director. And he's like, look, we looked at the history of Norton. It was always a forward-thinking brand. They were always pushing the envelope on technology. So we didn't want to just make another Commando. And I thought that was so refreshing. And it's crazy to me that this is their first version. This is the first iteration of the first version that we're seeing. And it was already very well sorted. It's a bike, you know, if I was in the market, it would be a bike that I would absolutely for realsies consider owning for myself. I liked it that much.
Wow. All right. Well, there you go, guys. Straight from the horse's mouth. Well, I appreciate you sitting down or standing up to have a chat with us about this bike. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this kind of like roundup style for the events that I don't get invited to, because...
Yeah, we could share this back and forth, right? This would be kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah. So let me know if you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one. See you later.